I was like, whoa, dude, chill.
They were not playing around.
That was that one guy. That was like the one guy who's like, I'm gonna make this look good, and everybody else was just kind of like, just kind of
Yeah,
throw it, and it was
this
just
guy's
kind of like
awesome.
land.
This guy's like, no,
That
I'm
guy
throwing
was
a
like,
spear.
Program complete. Enter when ready.
let's talk about these 12-foot beings that look like they're 6 foot.
Yeah, like 5'10", but they're like, yeah, there he comes.
Oh my god, he's 14 feet tall. He's a monkey man.
He is.
He's definitely not wearing a coat.
It was fine until a moment, and I was just like, okay.
Yeah. It's a fun episode, honestly. I enjoyed it. But there's a lot more cheesy stuff. It was harder for me. Like, I tried to pay more attention this week to like the questions. I did something weird, where like 20 episodes in, I was like, I should actually think about these questions while I'm watching the episode.
No.
And I was like, man, there's just too much stuff.
Risk. Risk is our business.
Out there. That way.
What happened?
Starfleet was founded to seek out new life. Well, there it sits.
Sounds like fun.
Rock and roll. 6.
We're not afraid of diversity. We don't persecute it, we embrace it.
At least I won't die alone.
Join our Federation of Planets. And reach for the stars.
Those were the days.
Okay. Welcome back to another Trek review, where we discuss Star Trek weekly on this podcast, and we cover an episode scene by scene and talk about it. This week's episode is from the original series, and it's entitled The Galileo 7. So for us, we're watching it in production order and not air date order. So for production, it is number 13, but it was aired as number 16. The Galileo 7 is a teleplay written by Oliver Crawford and S. Bar David. It was directed by Robert Gist. The synopsis for it is: Spock faces difficult command decisions when his shuttle crashes on a hostile world populated by barbarous giants. So before we jump into the teaser, let's ask Caleb what he thought of the episode.
I thought it was a fun episode.
Yeah.
It's funny. There's a lot of stuff in this episode that's like really like cheesy.
Yeah.
But the overall like storyline is really good. Like Spock being in command, and yeah, that whole the whole story where like they're on the planet and Kirk is being like pressured to leave.
Yeah.
It's a good storyline. It's I think that's kind of like what made Star Trek good in a lot of episodes, is like something bad's going on with half of the crew, but the other half is like trying to do stuff. And I really enjoyed all that aspects of it,
Yeah. So this one is in our watch, like our watch list, because it is just a classic episode that's really good. So
yeah,
doesn't necessarily harken to anything specific, but it's one of those episodes that I personally feel that somebody who's watching the series should watch.
I can see that. Yeah, there was no question to me like why we were watching it.
Yeah.
It digs into with like Spock's character more.
Yeah, exactly.
I get kind of tired. I mean, well, it's just because
Yeah, I know.
It's because this is supposed to be the first thing you're supposed to watch.
Right.
But I get really tired like now watching everything else first. I get really sick of like, oh, I'm not taking orders from this computer. this computer man.
Right.
He has no heart. He has no emotions whatsoever. It's like, yeah, I got it. Yeah, I got it. He's very logical. Yeah. They like really harken on the fact that like Spock doesn't have a heart. It's like,
Yeah.
no, actually, like you guys are being irrational humans.
Right.
Like when those things are like beating on the Galileo and they're like, hey, so we need to go outside and bury this guy. It's like,
Yeah.
no, you don't. No, you don't. Like, no, you have to do it. No. Mm-mm. No. Have you seen those spears?
Yeah.
It's like, what are you doing? No. Like, I get it that it's your crewmate
Right.
and it's like your friend, but like, no. Spock is right in that situation. But they want to portray him as being like this heartless, like monster.
Right.
But I understand that it's because like this is the original series. This is where all of the
Yeah.
information comes from.
This is like explaining what Vulcans are.
Yeah.
Right. But for
It's
you,
just funny
it's like
too.
you're coming off of the whole like everybody's irritated with DePaul, then they learn to like
Yeah.
DePaul, and DePaul becomes a cool character. And then we go over to Strange New Worlds, and it's like here is Spock, and Spock is like super human, like relatable.
And he has like, yeah.
Right.
That's what makes this funny too. Is Kirk says,
Yeah.
Kirk's like, wow, so is this the first time in your life, Mr. Spock, that you've showed emotions? And he's like, nope.
Yeah, that and also the few couple lines about him taking command, and I'm like, well, another proof that Strange New Worlds is timeline adjacent because that first episode you watch, he takes command.
Oh yeah.
So it's like,
without any hesitation.
but I guess it's maybe I think the way that they are trying to spin it is like that wasn't official, so it's like it's not on record that he took the Enterprise to that planet to save Lon. But yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you can say whatever you want. BS.
Yeah. Let's get into the teaser.
Yep.
So Captain's Log, Stardate 2821.5, en route to Macus 3 with a cargo of medical supplies. Our course leads us past Murasaki 312, a quasar-like formation. Vague, undefined. A priceless opportunity for scientific investigation. On board is Galactic High Commissioner Ferris, overseeing the delivery of the medicines to Macus 3. On the bridge of the USS Enterprise, Captain Kirk receives a signal from Spock that the shuttlecraft Galileo is ready for launch. A crew composed of Spock, Lieutenant Commander Scott, Dr. McCoy, Lieutenants Latimer, Gaetano, and Boma, and Yeoman Mears has been assembled aboard the shuttlecraft for the scientific mission. So, just two things for me.
Yeah.
The one I'll talk about that's just more funny is in last week's episode. In the intro of the video of last week, I used a scene, and Dr. Corby's like, yeah, but think of all the things that you could do if I made everybody was androids. And then Kirk is like, this is the same thing as world dictators used to do. And he names like Genghis Khan, Hitler. And then he says, Ferris. And then here, this guy's name is High Commissioner Ferris. And I was like, uh-oh. Like, is this the terrible guy? But I think it's just a funny little thing because Ferris and Maltuvis are not real people. They're just made up Star Trek names.
Yeah.
So when this guy when he says his name, I was like, maybe he is a terrible human being.
His facial features really made you think that he was like almost enjoying the fact that people were dying.
I agree. I agree.
Like very.
Some of his some of the things he did with like his mouth and his eye, like his brow.
Yeah,
like you're taking enjoyment out of this, sir.
It's like, oh yeah, we still have no communication. He's like, 2 hours, Mr. Kirk, 2 hours. Like, man, this guy is a heel. really enjoy when Kirk's like, yeah, and I would mind if you keep your nose off the bridge.
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, yeah, about friggin' time. I would have told that guy, you stay in your quarters. Step foot on my bridge. I don't want you here. I don't like you here.
I don't want to see you.
I don't want to see you.
So, for your benefit and for our other listeners' benefit who watch both the podcast and the RPG, Macus 3 is the planet that you guys ended up showing up at the last episode that we did. So when Mike and John and your support character go onto that ship and rescue that engineer, and then they like basically shut down the computer virus and then take him to his home world.
Yeah.
That's where they go. It's Macus 3.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
So that's the planet that had that plague.
Yes, that was the planet that they were delivering the medicine supplies to because of some sort of plague. Yeah.
Interesting. So maybe you're gonna send to the planet of giants.
Yeah, it was 3 days away at Warp 1. So yeah.
Yeah.
I think from the Quasar. I don't think from Taurus too. But yeah. Just thought you would appreciate that. That's what that was.
That's pretty cool.
Okay, High Commander Ferris enters the bridge from the turbolift and reminds the captain of his objection to this diversion from the greater priority of delivering medical supplies. The plague on the new Paris colonies is spiraling out of control, he contends, and the Enterprise must make the rendezvous on Macus in order for the supplies to be transferred from there to the colony. So I guess Macus 3 doesn't have the plague. It's New Paris colonies. They don't say what planet the New Paris colonies are on, but Macus 3 is going to transfer the medical supplies to the colony.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. I missed that note too. So I also thought Macus 3 had the plague. So yeah.
Yeah. But this was like already immediately when you're like, all right, I don't like this guy.
Right.
I don't like this guy at all.
I mean, just the way he literally, when the door opens and he's in that like weird uniform.
Yeah. Like, oh no. my authority complex is triggering. But the thing I will say though, in all honesty, in all fairness, I think Captain Kirk received this mission to take this medicine to this planet.
Right.
And it's almost like he's trying to be like defiant, be like, well, this is my starship. I have 3 days and I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do this to show this guy, like, hey, this is what we're doing out here.
Right.
And it goes horribly wrong because it always does.
Yeah. Yeah, it says Kirk understands this, but he also states that he is under orders from Starfleet to investigate all quasar and quasar-like phenomena, and observes that the rendezvous is in 5 days, while the trip to Macus will only last 3. Hence, he reasons he has 48 hours with which to study the phenomenon. So, like you're saying, he doesn't. He's like, I don't care. We don't got to get there immediately.
Yeah, like he almost does it like defiantly to like prove a point.
Yeah,
and it doesn't go over too well. Should have just taken that guy and just dropped him off with the medicine like immediately. And you don't ever take the shuttle pod into the anomaly. That's like the worst thing you can do.
Yeah, wasn't a great idea.
Yeah. What's this big green swirling cloud of radiation? I don't know. Send like all of our best people into it.
Yeah.
What? I couldn't believe that when like the shuttle takes off and it's like Spock and Scotty and McCoy.
Yeah.
Like, oh, yeah. There's your top 3 guys.
Yeah.
That's good.
It's almost like somebody was playing an RPG with them. They're like, okay, here's the quasar, and they're like, load them up with all of our primary characters.
I feel like our guys are like that sometimes. I mean, that's because like, we all want to like play the game.
Right, of course.
But like in a logistics standpoint, you're like, no, maybe let's not send like the captain, the doctor, the chief security officer, the science officer, and like the pilot on a mission.
Yeah.
I was like, nah, let's not do that. There's like, yeah, it's like Isaac Clarke is the only one that's in the engineer room. He's like the only person on the ship. Everybody else goes on the away mission.
Yeah. The Galileo proceeds to launch. While inside the phenomenon, the shuttlecraft encounters some rough turbulence, knocking it off course.
That's weird.
How shocking.
How weird. Isn't that weird?
The electrical interference generated by the phenomenon makes sensors unreliable and communication impossible for the shuttlecraft, as well as for the Enterprise. However, Uhura does manage to make out the words blown off course in an extremely garbled transmission. Kirk must attempt a rescue without working sensors inside a quasar-like formation, which contains 4 solar systems in the immediate vicinity. So I know you didn't get the benefit of watching this in the original thing, and I think the thing that I find when I put up clips on the channel, it's the non-remastered version, so you might get to see the clip specifically.
Yeah.
But when they go to leave
say
the shuttle bay, it's like very nice looking and very like ooh, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say like my brain now works in a way where I can like tell like, oh, a lot of this has been remastered.
Yeah.
You know,
Especially,
like that shuttle pod launch and everything.
Right.
Like I was like, oh yeah. Even the very beginning of the episode when they're flying into the the Enterprise is coming into screen and you have like that beautiful green like cloud.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, okay, this has all been like digitally like touched up.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool.
The thing I liked about the thing with the hangar and the shuttle bay leaving or the shuttle leaving the shuttle bay was it lifts and there's like this little yellow like support leg.
Yeah.
And then like sucks up and then goes into like the bottom of the thing. And I'm thinking to myself like, I don't think that was there in the original thing. And I think literally, I mean, it'll probably be down here at the bottom, but I think originally it's literally like a miniature shuttle and then it's on like a lazy Susan type thing and it literally just turns.
Oh, really?
And then like the doors open and then it's just like like a string or something and it just goes out.
That's awesome.
But
I didn't even picture that. I literally pictured it was just the scene from like them inside the shuttle. All right, engaged thrusters. Thrusters engaged there.
Yeah.
And then maybe like a little miniature like out in space showing them flying a little bit.
Yeah.
I love that too. It's like you're like, oh, okay, we're hitting turbulence.
Yeah. Well, that's how you show.
We'll talk about it in a second when they land on the planet. But that was like the first thing in the episode. I was like, oh my god, that's really funny.
All right. Captain's log, stardate 2821.7. The electromagnetic phenomenon known as Murasaki 312 whirls like some angry blight in space. A depressive reminder that 7 of our shipmates still have not been heard from. Equally bad, the effect has rendered our normal searching systems useless. Without them, we are blind and almost helpless. The Galileo is forced to make an emergency landing on Taurus 2, a lone planet at the heart of Murasaki 312.
Oh my.
While Scott attempts repairs on the damaged craft, Latimer and Gaetano are sent out to scout the area and instructed to maintain visual contact with the ship. Meanwhile, on the Enterprise, the sensors remain inoperative and the transporters are not operating in a safe manner. Kirk orders that a second shuttlecraft, Columbus, prepare for launch in order to search the planet's surface for the other craft. The thing I don't know if I should, I guess we could talk about it now. The thing that I really, really like about this couple scenes in this episode is like everyone is like getting mad at Spock, right? Like even McCoy, which is a very common
Yeah.
thing. Like McCoy
Yeah.
gets mad at him and all this stuff. But the thing I appreciated was Scotty just keeps working,
Well, yeah.
right? Like he doesn't chime in really. He just like he also probably feels the same way. Like he clearly
Yeah.
probably doesn't like certain things, or he's also thinking like, well, yikes, like that's kind of rough, Spock. But he's just plugging away, like he doesn't. And there's a specific scene where they want him to do the funeral like talk, like the eulogy. And
Yeah.
Spock's like, I'm not doing that. And then he cuts it. He turns back to Scotty, and he's like, okay. And Scotty's like, yeah, if you could just. He doesn't even acknowledge that it's also maybe a thing he should do. He's just like, yeah,
Yeah.
we got to keep working on this thing.
Yeah. I gotta keep wedging these Fisher Price toys in here.
Exactly. Putting it up to his eye, right? Whoa.
Ooh. What is this? A phaser? I do appreciate that. That's Scotty's just all business.
Yeah. They totally just handed James doing like stuff, and they were just like, we don't know what it does, just you figure it out. He was just like, all right, just having fun with it, because it's like,
well, there's a part too where he's they're laying on the floor. He's laying on the floor working on that thing.
Yeah.
And when they start hitting the top of the shuttle with the rock, he kind of like rolls over. That was so good. And then they don't cut. They should have cut earlier when he's like, all right, yeah, we can use the phasers. And he takes the phaser and he lowers it in on top of the pipe, and he just sets it on top of the pipe. I was like, oh my god, if you would have cut 3 seconds off of that,
they would have just shown him yeah, exactly.
They would have showed him going, putting it in and not being yeah, right here is good. That's not. I don't think that's.
I love it. I love it so much.
I do. That was pretty good.
Yeah. I was
looking at all those parts, those space parts. Those,
yeah.
I was like,
where's that going?
Those are definitely the shuttle is all sleek and metal, and the pipes are all metal, and you have these bright plastic parts. I don't think those go in the ship. I don't think those are part of the ship.
Yeah, the thing that I thought you would really like was when Spock tells Gaetano and Latimer to go out, and he pushes the thing, and that the phaser thing comes out of the wall, or it's
yeah, well, yeah, so we'll get to that.
Oh, well, I think it's right here. I think this is where
it is. No, but that's there's a question at the end.
I see.
Yeah.
I will say nothing more.
No, the thing that I really like from those guys, is he's like, hey, stay within sight of the ship, and they're like, got it, sir. And they go out, and the next time you see them, they're out in the middle of the fog, on some hill, and they're like, I hear stuff all over the place. All you had to do is stand outside of the ship, stand outside of the ship, and just survey the land. They're climbing up some mountain, and he's like, "Oh!" I was like, "Dude, you had no business being that far away."
Yeah, it's true. You deserve to get that spear.
I was like, "What are they doing?" But it's that's so typical. It's so typical, Star Trek.
Yeah,
They're like, "Hey, so security, but stay close." I'm like, got it.
Wander as
or
far
any scene, right? The Lost World where that guy goes and pees.
Yeah.
And he's got to go 50 miles into the woods to pee.
Yeah. Tensions mount between Kirk and Ferris as Kirk makes it clear that he plans to use every spare minute to search for his stranded shipmates. Uhura temporarily acts as science officer and helps to narrow the search for Galileo by discovering that one planet in the area, Taurus 2, is type M. Kirk has Sulu set course for the planet. As Scott assesses the damage, he finds that the Galileo has lost a great deal of fuel, so much that they would be unable to reach escape velocity. And to even reach orbit, they would need to leave at least 500 pounds lighter than when they arrived. That's the weight of 3 grown men. Mm-hmm. Immediately everybody was like, how dare you?
Like, what are you talking about, Spock? I was like, I wouldn't worry about it. I'm sure those two no-name guys are gonna die.
Yeah. It was really funny for him to be like that, and then a few scenes later, all of a sudden they come out and it's like, yeah, well, we only need like 150 pounds, more or something like that. And then
Yeah.
and he was like, oh,
And they're
nice.
like, yeah, well, we'll find stuff on the ship to throw out. And Spock's like, everything on the ship we need.
The thing that I was
Nothing.
thinking about, and I thought maybe they did, but they didn't. I said, just rip the seats out. Like, why does nobody has to sit down? Just like lay on the floor.
Yeah.
Like, who
No, they
cares?
didn't.
Those aren't
I thought that
necessary.
too.
Those are
Like
clearly
you could just like sit on the floor.
exactly. Half of them were anyways, right? When stuff happens, they all get out of their seats and react to it. Like, get rid of the chairs.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is yeah. The thing I thought was funny is like when they crash land,
Mm-hmm.
and it shows everybody, and then there's people like all over the floor, and then the guy there that sits behind the pilot, he's like his
Oh,
head is all bashed and he's bleeding.
yeah.
And I'm like, what did he hit his head on? There's like nothing in front of him. He's like in the seat in the middle of you have like Spock and the other helmsman, and like
Yeah.
they all have like dashes in front of them where like they could have like hit their heads on like the computer stuff. And they
Right.
have like everybody else, like there's nothing in front of them, like not even the chair. And he's like,
Right.
oh, my head. I bashed my head. I was like, on what? On what?
It's because when he got hit, he did like a nosedive right into the floor
Right into the floor and then sat back up.
and
Yeah.
sat back down. He was like, "Oof, I gotta take a seat."
And then the girl, she was all sprawled out all over the floor. She couldn't
Yeah.
even. I'm like, dude, that's a rough landing right there. That's a bad.
That Boma guy, right? He had that fake blood on his nose, and he's like wiping it away. Yeah. Noting that very little of the equipment on board is dispensable, and that 500 pounds roughly equals the weight of 3 grown adults, Spock prepares himself for the difficult decision of which 3 crewmen to leave behind in order that the rest may survive.
Yeah, they immediately start like playing favorites. Like, oh, who's it going to be?
Yeah.
Like, well,
Yeah.
I'm obviously not going to like tell you now because then you like won't work.
Right.
Right. If I told you now, like I would have a mutiny.
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm going to wait to make my decision until it's absolutely necessary.
I'll let you know right as the shuttle doors close.
Yeah, exactly. And it's you two. See you later. It's Gaetano and Latimer. They're still out there climbing mountains. It is at this point that Spock's cold logic begins to unnerve some of the crew, most notably Lieutenant Boma. Boma proposes that they draw lots to determine who stays behind, but Spock replies that he is better qualified to make decisions than would be a random drawing of lots. While on their scouting expedition, Latimer and Gaetano hear strange grinding sounds, seemingly coming from all around them in the dense fog. Attempting to escape back to the Galileo, they encounter a giant, spear-wielding caveman-like humanoid. The creature is hostile and attacks the two crewmen. Taken by surprise, Latimer is hit by a spear in the back, mortally wounding him. He falls from a rock ledge to the ground, and Gaetano then attempts to fend off the Turian with his phaser, firing blind. I liked how when he got hit in the back, he went from being Lieutenant Latimer to some other guy and then fell into the... It was like immediately
even notice.
the same guy.
I didn't even notice.
I was trying to look for it, but I also... It must have been like a censors thing for television in the 60s. Like when Gaetano comes down after Latimer is hit in the back with a spear, and he's coming down, and then he kind of like drops, and then it was like this digital weird like line of fog.
And
it was clear that that when he came down, you could see Latimer must have had the spear in his back, and it was either it looked really stupid and they covered it up, or sensors were like, you can't show this thing like inside the guy's body. So I don't know which was which, but
I noticed that you couldn't see him because there was all that fog, but I didn't notice that it was like CGI fog. I wasn't really paying that close attention to it.
yeah, it's at least in the remaster thing. I don't know what the original thing looked like, but it just was like a very clear evidence of like a hard digital line of like fog, so that you could only see like his one leg and like a part of the spear. But they kind of didn't shy away from stuff, because like when Spock shows up and like pulls it out of
they
like,
kept the blood on it,
and I was like, oh wow, okay.
Yeah, I like that. I like when he pulls that spear out. I was like, oh man,
gross.
and they're like, oh, our crewman's dead, and he's like, this spear was chiseled out of stone. Mahogany shaft. Nice. Yeah.
He's like, fascinating.
Like, Spock, a man is dead. And he's like, yeah, but what does that do for us now? Nothing. Have you seen this spear? It's huge.
Yep.
One of my favorite parts is coming up when they're like, what's that sound? And he's like, and it's just like metal grinding. And he's like, sounds like wooden sticks being wrapped in leather and a stone on the end. I was like, what? It sounds like what? Like, what are you talking about? It sounds like just metal scraping, and he's like, leather and woodworking? I was like, what? They're making more spears.
They're making so many more spears.
Like, what? There's not even any trees on the planet.
Yeah.
And they're making spears.
Because they live where all the trees are. They don't live out here in the wastelands with the fog. This is where they hunt for their food. Gaetano, successful in driving the Torian away, is found by Spock and Boma slumped over, staring dumbfounded at the body of his fallen crewmate. After running a bit ahead to make sure that the giant is gone, Spock returns and examines the spear. He observes a similarity to the Folsom point, commenting that it is crude and not very efficient. Again, Spock's words unnerve his crewmates, particularly Boma, who finds it highly inappropriate for him to be musing about archaeology when one of their comrades has just been slain. Spock, logical as ever, responds, "My concern for the dead will not bring him back to life, Mr. Boma." Boma and Gaetano decide to carry the body back to the ship. Spock has no objection, since doing so will not interfere with the repair efforts. When he offers to help them, they refuse. Captain's log, Stardate 2822.3, we continue to search, but I find it more difficult each moment to ward off a sense of utter futility and great loss. There is no change in the status of sensors, transporters, and communications. The search party has found no sign of the Galileo or its passengers. Kirk orders the Columbus to widen its course 2 degrees on every lap from now on. Sulu objects that this leaves significant gaps in the search area, but Kirk notes that they simply do not have enough time to cover the entire planet, and this way they cover the most area, even if they leave gaps in doing so. Kirk advises Sulu to keep his attention on the helm. It's like, hey, this is like Sulu shows what it's like to be a proper officer up, ahead, like at the helm in front of the captain, where he's like, hey, you understand, Captain, if you do that, like, you're not going to look at it. You're going to have huge gaps in like your searching area. And he's like, I understand, but we're searching the whole planet. Like, it's okay. And he's like, very good. And he just turns back to go back to work.
Yeah.
He notes his concern or his minor objection, and then
no joke or nothing,
Right. Back inside the shuttlecraft, McCoy and Yeoman Mears report to Spock that they were able to gather about 150 pounds of non-essential machinery for removal from Galileo. Spock commends them, but observes that even after dumping that weight, they are still 150 pounds too heavy. McCoy and Spock argue a bit about the ethics of leaving behind one man to save 6, but they are interrupted by Boma, who, upon entering the craft, announces that they are ready for Latimer's funeral ceremony. Spock has no interest in performing such a ceremony, as his expertise is needed in assisting Scott with the repairs. He attempts to push off the funerary duties to Dr. McCoy, but McCoy insists that it is Spock's responsibility as their commanding officer. Spock accepts this duty, but insists that the repairs take the utmost priority. He argues that by taking care of first things first, he intends to maximize the chances of survival for the remaining crew. Boma leaves and closes Galileo's doors.
Yeah, it's like, no, I'm trying to get us off this planet.
Right, yeah. It's like, to me, I get what they're doing, like you said. It's like a partially annoying thing, but then it also kind of blows up in Spock's face like later on. But
yeah,
but I understand, like, they're doing it like a twofold thing. They're trying to show you how Vulcans and Spock and like the differences between humans and Vulcans. But then I also feel like they make him so just, I don't know, just so unrealistically like cold.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't understand, like he's logical, but when it comes to anything that has emotions, he doesn't understand it at all. And it's like, no, it's not like he doesn't, he knows what funerals are. He understands, like Vulcans have funerals, all this stuff.
Like he's acting like he doesn't understand like human culture.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it's true.
To me, I think that I think the line they should have incorporated the line, but I guess they just were just trying to be like two one way or the other. They're not trying to ride the fine line like you would want, which would be reality. But they should have had Spock say to Boma or any of the people in the shuttlecraft that like, okay, I get that you want a funeral thing. We're trying to get off this thing because, hey, do you remember that Latimer just got killed by like giant things? Like you saw the size of that spear. Like being outside the shuttlecraft right now is dangerous. And it's like, we're not all going to gather outside and bury this guy and expose ourselves to possibly more of you getting killed. So it's like, please respectfully place his body somewhere and then come inside the shuttlecraft. And if we have the capability or the time, then yes, we will make a proper burial. But right now, that's not our priority.
Yep.
And instead, it just comes across like, well, that's stupid. You do it, McCoy. And McCoy's like, I'm not doing it. You're doing it. And he's just like, well, if that's the case, then I'm just going to keep working on the shuttlecraft.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, okay. Yeah. Like, no wonder why they hate Spock. He's terrible to them.
Well, and not to mention, like, well, I get like having McCoy do it because like McCoy's the doctor. Like he should do the funeral too, you know?
Right. Yeah, Spock cutting to McCoy makes sense, but it's just like
and Spock is a science guy, so obviously he's gonna help the engineer with the ship.
Right.
The other people are just kind of like
standing around, right?
Dead weight, you know?
Yeah.
And that's how he views them. And I think that's why he's so like rash.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I agree with you. I think he's a little too.
They just make him too cold. They make him too like he has no feelings for anything. And it's like he may be like, one, he's half human, so he has some emotions, but two, like it's also logical to understand how other species feel about things.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, survival and leaving the planet is like top priority, but also like he would understand that it's logical to, you know, also like get rid of the fears of his crew, his shipmates.
Yeah.
And I get like too, they're trying to spin this angle that like Spock has never been in command before, so therefore he's not good at it. But it's like, so
Yeah.
it's a weak argument. It's a weak argument.
Yeah. Yeah, if Spock really is like all like logistical,
Right.
then he would use that to like help the crew, you know,
Yeah.
more than just being like, oh no, we're not doing that.
Right.
He would like help them understand like through a logical
Exactly.
point of view, like why that's dangerous, why you shouldn't
Right. But I get it. It's a thing where he has they're writing him so that he's consistently cold and unemotional and just makes like really, really awful choices without any type of emotion or care for other people. And then at the very end, all of a sudden he makes a like irrational, emotional decision. And it's like, see, there is some humanity in him. Like I understand that that's what they're building towards, but it's like, could have been executed better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he could have built up to it a little better.
Right. Later, while Scott and Spock continue to attempt repairs, a ruptured tube leaks all the remaining fuel. The shuttlecraft is now without any means of propulsion. Disappointed by the event, Spock advises a pessimistic Scott to consider the alternatives, stating there are always alternatives. Outside, loud grinding noises are heard again. Spock identifies the sounds as wood rubbing on leather. Boma suggests that if the Turians are a tribal culture and thereby have a sense of unity, the crew can use that to their advantage. By hurting them, they can be dissuaded from bothering the crew again. McCoy and Gaetano agree that this is a logical course of action. Spock is hesitant, but concedes that there is logic to the plan. Though he abhors unnecessary violence toward other forms of life, he proposes a third plan to scare them by blasting phasers near the giants, firing not to injure or kill, but to simply frighten. He sends McCoy and Mears back to the shuttlecraft to assist Scott while he leads Boma and Gaetano towards the Turians. I have a weird thing, and they did it in Star Wars too, where they kind of just arbitrarily will write in like, oh, this thing requires fuel. And you're like, but you don't really explain how it works. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
Like we understand in our world that like, oh, the car is low on gasoline, so therefore it will not function. Or it's like low on diesel or oil or something. But in the future, they all are like, you can do warp things in this thing and that thing. And it's like, well, what is it using? Like, how is that functioning? Because otherwise it doesn't, I don't know. It's just, it felt very abrupt when Scott refers to them like being low on fuel. And then when he's like, oh no, all the fuel's gone now. It didn't seem like it felt like it was a Star Trek thing. Because I don't know in Enterprise if Trip is ever like when they're in the shuttle pods, like he refers to it as fuel. He refers to it to like how much power they have. Like, you know, like that type of like when him and Malcolm are trapped in the shuttle pod, maybe it was fuel. Maybe he refers to it as fuel. I just don't remember.
I don't remember. I don't think so. I think they talk a lot about like life support and like the heaters.
I think it's more of like a power stabilization. Like if you put, you know, it's like they only have so much power because it's essentially like a giant battery or something of that nature. So it's like you know, if you divert, you know, in order to make yourself live as long as possible, you're going to shut down the engines, you're going to turn off sensors, you're going to do certain things so that life support can stay can stay on longer.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it was kind of weird.
Yeah. And I thought of you though, and I know you didn't comment on it, but it made me think of you as when Scotty's looking down in there and he's like this, and then you hear like the sound effect, it's like, and then Scotty just looks up and he's just like, well, there goes all the fuel. It's like, it was just audio put into the episode so the audience understood that like something bad was leaking. But in reality, you just think he's just looking down, and then he's just like, "Well, that's it. That's it." That just made me laugh. Made me think of you how you're like, "Oh, okay." Like, sure. What else is happening?
Yeah, I know. And he's like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't know. Something somewhere else must have been open or something."
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay.
The one line I did like, what we were talking about, where they're trying to decide like how to deal with these giant like people, is how Spock is like, yeah, I get it. Like, it's logical to attack them because that's how they clearly are behaving. Is you attack, like if you're more offensive or aggressive to them, they may stop attacking you. But he's like, but at the same time, like, we shouldn't just be down here like murdering things. Like, perhaps let's find an alternative so that these things can live, because that's not really our goal, is to come down here and murder all of these creatures. Because that's, in reality, that's like really what Star Trek is like, yeah, these things are trying to murder us, but also their lives on another planet. And it's like, we're already interfering with their natural like growth just by simply existing. So
Yeah, like, yeah, for all intents and purposes, like, you're the aliens, you're the
Right.
enemies.
right.
Like, well, they attacked us, we should just kill them immediately. Like, but I like that scene because Spock is basically like, he's like, yeah, I don't understand how, like, you guys are so mad about like death, and then now here you are, you want to like murder everybody that you see.
Kill them all.
Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yet
Yeah,
again,
right.
though, no red shirts die, so it was
No, all
shirts.
yellows.
Yeah. The plan appears to be executed successfully, and Spock returns with Boma to the shuttlecraft, leaving Gaetano to stand guard and stay in communication with the ship. When he returns, Scott tells Spock of an idea he has to reconfigure the main reactor to function on the energy from the handheld phasers. Unfortunately, their only means of escape happens to be their only means of defense. Using the phasers for fuel disallows their use for defensive measures against the giants. Spock and the others conclude that it is their only option. Scott begins the modifications. The Enterprise transporters are now operational, and Kirk decides to beam 3 landing parties down directly to the planet in hopes of increasing the chances of finding the lost crew. Crewman Gaetano is attacked and loses his phaser when a large rock is thrown against his hand. He tries to scramble up a cliff, but cannot, and is ultimately killed horribly by a Turian.
Yeah, they sure don't like using the phasers all that often.
No, it got it knocked right out of his hand, knocked rid of that rock. Perfect. Right in the boom.
Well, Spock's like, all right, we'll shoot near them and scare them off. And then they do it. And they're like, all right, let's go back to shuttle. Oh, you stay here by yourself. And then he hears noises, and then he just stands there.
Yeah.
Like, just shoot again. Just keep
Like,
shooting blindly.
Shoot in the direction and head to the shuttlecraft. Right, yeah.
He goes and tries to hide, and that freaking rock comes across. I was like, oh man.
Yeah. So I was 100% fine with this episode because I don't remember. I remember the large beats of all of these original series. I don't remember minute for minute.
Yeah.
When the rock hits him in the hand, like, oh, okay. I was fine with the episode, but the second he turns around and does a very, very poor job of trying to make it look like he's climbing up the rock, and then he does the whole 1950s and lays against the wall. Yeah, exactly. I was like, okay.
Well, so the best part about that entire scene is before he even climbs the thing, the rock hits the phaser out of his hand, and he thinks in his head, he's like, see, which way is the shuttle? Okay, it's that way. I'm gonna go this way to this wall.
Yeah.
See if I can get up this wall.
Yeah.
Like, first of all, the rock came from that direction.
Right.
So why didn't you just immediately run to where the shuttle is that way?
Right.
Way. And he's like, nah, I'm going to try this way. Oh, boy.
I think what we're supposed to think as 1967 watchers, yes, because this originally aired January 5th, 1967. So now we're in 67. I think what we're supposed to view as 67 watchers is think that like there's just a huge line of these ape things, and he's just trying to like he can't go that way because they're all like there. I think that's what you're supposed to think, but it doesn't come across that way at all.
Not
It
at all.
comes across as one guy threw a rock and the other guy just slowly walked over to him.
Yeah, it was really weak.
It was a weak death. That spear, like the spear one, was good when Latimer gets it in the back. You're like, oh man, these things are terrifying. But then this happens, and I was like, no, they don't seem that bad. So we're at the halfway point. So go down to the comment section, and right in the comment section, wood rubbing on leather. Or you can just put, as I saw in the closed captioning, intense scraping sounds. I'll also take that.
Yeah.
Spock, McCoy, and Boma arrive at Gaetano's last known position. He is nowhere to be found, but Spock discovers his phaser laying on the ground. Spock orders the other two to return to the craft and hands over Gaetano's phaser to Scott for conversion. Boma objects, but Spock's response is to hand them his phaser as well. Spock then pursues a scientific curiosity regarding what happened to Gaetano. I like that Spock gives him his phaser to a degree, but the thing I like a lot was just how McCoy was. I know it wasn't like supposed to be this really kind of heartfelt scene, but it felt really heartfelt. Is Boma's like, oh man, like, are we gonna make it? Like, we're gonna, like, he's starting to kind of freak out. Like, we're probably gonna die and not make it. And then McCoy says to him, like, well, we're definitely not gonna make it if we don't take these phasers like back to the shuttlecraft. And I like that like mentality of like, hey, it's okay, man. Like, we're gonna go and like we're gonna go back here and like what we're gonna focus on something that we can do rather than just be terrified that we're gonna get murdered or whatever.
I think that was because, like, specifically, Spock was going into like the trouble zone.
Yeah,
to get that guy's body, and so McCoy was finally like happy with the decision he was making as a captain.
Yeah, that's probably true.
But even when he comes back, they still are like, they still have another argument.
Yeah,
and even like McCoy like yells at him.
Yeah,
with the other guy yelling at him.
Yeah, like, what's happening?
Like, what do you want? Like, what do you want from him?
Sneaking up to the Turian, Spock finds Gaetano's lifeless body and carries it off towards the shuttlecraft. The Turians soon notice him and begin throwing numerous spears, one of which just narrowly misses Spock's head, but is blocked by the tip of a protruding rock. Soon after Spock makes it back, one of the creatures, which followed Spock, begins assaulting the craft itself by slamming large rocks against it, with the terrified crew inside. Spock notes, as much to himself as anyone, that logic has completely failed him in this instance. He had not anticipated that the creatures would attack after seeing their superior weapons, just as he didn't anticipate the resentment shown by his crew during the mission. As the shuttle shakes, Scott reports it'll be another hour at least before the phasers are drained, an hour the crew clearly doesn't have right now. So here is your perfect scene where Spock's got that guy in his thing and he's running, and then that spear comes and it's like, and it hits like the foam, whatever, like styrofoam edge of that rock, and it's like blam, and it just shatters. And
yeah, it was crazy.
It was pretty good.
There's like two things in this part where, like, when Leonard Nimoy comes over and he like picks that guy up, like, that guy's not like a small guy. That's a pretty big guy.
Yeah.
And Leonard Nimoy is like tall, and he like picks that guy right up and carries him like effortlessly.
I know.
And then that spear, I mean, that was totally unintentional. That spear almost hit him in the head.
Yeah.
And who knows what those were made out of back then? It probably wasn't.
I mean, it
It was
clearly
strong
was
enough to take part of that.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, when that I'm glad that you mentioned it too, because when that spear hit that edge of that rock and it was like boom, and it kind of like shattered, like the rock like exploded, and I was like,
Yeah.
I was like, this is intense.
I rewound that like 3 times. I was like, oh my God, that was like right by his face. And then you can see like that guy was like, oh man. And then like the other 2 guys throwing spears, they threw those other 2 like almost like at the ground, like away from like letting him away.
Like, yeah, like gently kind of just adjacent to where those other
But he didn't break. He didn't break character. He just kept right on going. I was like, man, that's pretty good.
I liked it a lot.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Then he gets in there and they're smashing the shuttle pod with the rock, and he's like, this shouldn't be happening. Illogical. Captain's log 2823.1. Our landing parties are on the surface of Taurus 2, and we continue to hope. Instruments are only slowly returning to an operable condition as the ion storm slowly disperses. On the ship, we can only wait helplessly. Spock comes up with an idea to use the ship's batteries to electrify the outer hull. Apparently, the Turians were actually touching the ship at the time it was electrified, as the creatures leave shortly after. Boma then argues that it is time to perform the funeral rites for their 2 fallen crewmates. Eventually, Spock relents and allows the burial, provided the creatures will permit it. I'm glad that this thing commented on it, because it's a really cool thing to see James Doohan like actually making electrical stuff happen. Like that was very clearly like a live thing, and he's like smacking it with metal and it's sparking.
Yeah, I know, that was kind of crazy.
But the thing that I appreciated was if it's just bashing the ship with rocks, like that wouldn't do anything. Like,
yeah, apparently he was touching it with his hand at that time.
It was like, ooh, it's so smooth. And then it electrocuted.
Like, not even making a dent.
Yeah, exactly. And then he's like, oh, what was that? Let me touch it again.
Yeah.
And then he was telling his other buddies to come over and touch it because it's hurting him. And they're like, what do you mean? He's like, oh, run away.
Yeah. And then I just picture him like looking over the ridge, and they're like, hey, they're putting those guys in the ground. Throw spears at them again. They're outside.
We fooled them.
Even that scene where Spock is carrying that guy, and you can see him like coming towards the shuttle, and you can just see like spears going through the air.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Never again is there accuracy, except for that Rock and Latimer ever so perfect. Yeah. Other than that, they've never thrown spears before in their lives. On the Enterprise, Landing Party 2 has just beamed back with a few casualties and no shuttlecraft survivors. Lieutenant Kelowitz, who led the party, reports back to the captain, describing the same giant creatures encountered by the Galileo crew. By his account, Ensign O'Neill got a spear through the body before we even knew they were around. Lieutenant Imamura survived with severe lacerations and a dislocated shoulder, but should be fine. I love when old TV shows do this, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
He comes onto the screen. He is covered in like dirt and like soot, and it's all over him. And I'm like, what? Why?
Yeah.
It doesn't make it. It's the only way to show, but he's been dealing with some things. It's been really intense down on the planet. Wouldn't have Kelowitz gotten the spear through him, they would have been like, oh, and then just ran and then beamed back up to the ship. Like, I don't know. It was just really funny.
He looks like he's been fighting.
Right. Like he's been like in a dust storm fighting them hand to hand, you know?
Yeah, it's always my favorite when like they show up on screen and they're like, "It's bad, Captain. It's real bad down there."
Can you see it, Enterprise? Can you see it? Yeah, exactly.
Enterprise!
Commissioner Ferris arrives on the bridge and informs the captain that his time has run out. Ferris now assumes command of the ship under the powers granted by him by Title 15 Galactic Emergency Procedures. Kirk orders the remaining landing parties to return and calls the Columbus back in, holding out hope that the Galileo might still report in the time it takes for the others to return. With great reluctance, Kirk commands Sulu to set course for Macus 3. A thing I thought was going to happen is when Kirk is like, "Yup, space normal speed." I thought for sure that Ferris guy's to come back and be like, "Are you kidding me? Like, we need to get there now. Like, your time has run out." And he's like, "We are headed that way. We're going." And it never happens. And I was like, "Oh, that's such a normal thing to happen." Is like the guy to flip out and get mad, and then Kirk to be smarmy about it and just be like, "Oh no, we're headed in that direction."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like Kirk's like last like defiant.
Yeah,
I like when he tells that guy like, "Hey, look, you're on my starship.
right.
You don't have any authority here." So I guess the rule is like if there's an emergency, that guy
Yeah,
is in charge. If it depends on like the emergency. But you could also argue that the Enterprise has a bigger emergency.
yeah, right, exactly. Oh yeah, here it is. It says NBC broadcast standards ordered that the view of Latimer with a large spear in his back shall not be clearly seen. When Gaetano fires his phaser into the mist, there is an additional mist optical effect which had to be added in post-production that blocks the view of the impaled officer. Interesting.
Oh wow. So that was like original editing.
It was original.
That's cool.
So a cool thing, the story of this episode originated from writer Oliver Crawford, who thought about a science fiction retelling of the 1939 film Five Came Back, which co-starred a young Lucille Ball.
Wow.
So the synopsis is for that movie is survivors of a jungle plane crash realized that their repaired airplane can only carry 5 passengers.
Nice.
And the Galileo 5. So the reason why I think it's worth noting about Lucille Ball is the success of the sitcom with her and her husband allowed her and her husband to purchase their own studio, Desilu Productions. And when they divorced in 1960, Lucy took over the studio herself, making her one of the most powerful women in Hollywood. So 4 years after their divorce, Roddenberry came to the studio with an idea for a pilot that would grow into Star Trek, right? He came with The Cage.
Yeah.
She bought the series, even she didn't quite understand it. She thought the title referred to a group of traveling USO performers during World War II. It's like Star Trek. Yeah. Like celebrity stars, like going overseas,
trekking across the
she may have initially misunderstood the Star Trek concept, but had understood that just because things look wrong on the outside, that things can be proved. The things you can prove critics wrong. She supported the vision. And thanks to her, The Cage got produced. And then she stood by the show through 2 pilots being shot in a massive budget. And it says a studio accountant named Edwin Hawley is on record as saying, if it were not for Lucy, there would be no Star Trek.
That's so funny. I wonder if she ended up liking Star Trek.
I'm sure to a degree. I don't think she probably like super cared, but yeah. So I just thought that was pretty cool that like that's kind of what they were copying was that 1939 film, and then that film happened to have Lucy in it, and she's kind of the reason why Star Trek is even a thing. So
Yeah, it's kind of like full circle.
yeah. Okay, Captain's log supplemental. The search parties have returned to the ship. The Columbus is on its way back. I have been compelled to abandon the search. According to Uhura, the Columbus will be back and docked within 23 minutes. Thus, only 23 minutes remain for the search. On the surface, Scott has just finished draining the last phaser into the ship's power supply and estimates that they have just enough power to maintain orbit for a few hours, and even enough to perform a controlled burn re-entry. Scotty says that the ship will be ready to take off in 8 minutes. Spock then tells McCoy and Boma that they have 10 minutes to bury Gaetano, and that he will assist them. Like you said, it was funny that they go out, they clearly dig, they don't really dig, they just kind of laid the bodies and then put rocks all over them because they're big mounds.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, Justin, we just get the last things, we kind of hang our heads in solemn, and then all of a sudden it was like, there they are, throw the spears.
Yeah, it was very, very much like that. Yeah.
The Columbus returns to the Enterprise and docks. The landing parties have all been beamed aboard. Kirk is left without any further excuses for delay. Therefore, the Enterprise begins the trip to Macus 3 at space normal speed. And Kirk, not ready to give up hope for the Galileo crew, orders full reverse sensor scans, beams, directed aft. Yeah, that was one of the few. That was like one of the scenes I actually legitimately really liked.
Mm-hmm.
Was the fact that he was like, "Oh no, we're headed to Macus, but we're going as slow as humanly possible."
Yeah,
and also, we're still going to be looking backwards because he knows his buddy Spock is out there doing something.
Yeah, he's not going to give up on him. Plus, you can't have the satisfaction of that guy being right,
Yeah, he really didn't want that guy to be even slightly in charge or have any authority over him. On Taurus 2, the funeral ceremony is interrupted by flying spears. McCoy, Boma, and Spock are attacked by the Taurians again and race back to the ship. After throwing one of the spears back at the assailants in order to buy more time for the others, Spock turns and makes for the ship as well. But just after a few steps, a large rock is hurled at him and traps him against a rock face. He tells the others to take off without him, but they disregard the command and roll the heavy boulder off of him so that he can return. I told you, no, go, get out of here, no.
I gave you a direct order to leave me behind.
Yeah, when he gets on that shuttlecraft, right? He turns to McCoy and he's like, I told you to leave. It's like, ooh, someone's in trouble.
Yeah, McCoy's like, shut up, you idiot.
Yeah, it's true. McCoy was like, I don't care, Richard. Just shut up.
You're not getting out of it that easy, you idiot.
The three make it back to the shuttlecraft, but the extra time taken to free Spock allowed the Taurians to gather around the ship and physically hold it down to prevent it from taking off. After firing the boosters, they were able to break free and take off. Unfortunately, once they attain orbit, they come to the realization that without the boosters, they will not be able to make a soft landing. And if they are not rescued, will face a burn-up in the atmosphere upon re-entry. Spock grimly reminds his party that thanks to Boma and McCoy trying to save him, they will have ruined their slim chance for survival. At this point, Scott reminds Spock of his earlier comment that there are always alternatives. Spock, in an act that surprises the others, acknowledges that he may have been mistaken. My brain really wanted to read that as that he has made mistakes.
Yeah.
We're flying. That's when she falls out of her seat and she's like, we're doing it.
She falls out of her seat a lot in this episode.
A lot, yeah. And the thing, it's really funny.
Yeah.
Is I feel like I know they couldn't because they were saying it would damage like the power reserves or something. But it was like, wouldn't that be the time to electrify the hull? Like, ooh, when they're all
Yeah.
gripping on it.
When they're all holding it down, yeah.
Yeah.
It could have just been a theory too that they were holding it down. You didn't actually see
True.
that's what they were doing. That was just Scotty's wishful thinking.
Yeah.
Well, I did all this work. They must be holding us down. There's no other.
There's no possible way, right? Yeah.
It's not my repair work. That wouldn't be.
No.
That wouldn't be wrong.
No. When they achieve orbital altitude, while chasing the Enterprise, Scott estimates they have enough fuel to maintain it for 45 minutes. At this point, Spock commits an act of desperation. He jettisons the fuel and ignites it in the hope that the Enterprise might see the flare and come to their rescue. This leaves them just 6 minutes of orbit. The Galileo crew is shocked, but soon Scott realizes that Spock's action was like sending up a flare and offering that it was a good gamble. So did you see that coming? Did you see them? That's how they were going to get rescued?
No. No, I
Yeah,
didn't, honestly.
Kind of a cool
because
thing.
he flipped that switch, and I was like, oh, okay. I assumed that he was using the boosters to propel them like through the orbit of space, through the planet.
Yeah.
And then they showed the thing, and they just kind of like, you can just see the shuttle pods just going around the planet. And I was like, well, what the heck is the point of that? I'm like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
But I did, yeah, I like that. I like how it was showed like a flare, like that big green streak across the planet was pretty cool.
Yeah. Fortunately, the gamble pays off. The flare catches Sulu's watchful eye, whereupon he informs the captain, and they change course 180 degrees to once again attempt a rescue, this time without Ferris noticing. As the Galileo's orbit begins to decay, the 5 surviving passengers prepare for the inevitable burnup. Just as the ship is about to incinerate, the Enterprise beams the crew out, alive and well. Upon hearing the good news, an emotional Kirk orders Sulu to resume the course to Macus 3 at warp factor 1. So the thing I was thinking about in this scene is the burnup is starting to happen, and it was like how much it must have sucked to be those actors, to be on that like closed little box thing, and they're just pumping that fake smoke in there. And they all have to like get close-ups on their face, and there's like more smoke blowing on them. You're just like, oh my god.
And they were like really sweating in there too. They were
like,
oh, it's so hot.
Oh, I'm burning up.
And then then you're wet, and then they're pumping smoke, and you're like, oh.
Yep.
Goodbye, Mr. Spock.
Oh, we're going down, Mr. Spock. We're going down.
Goodbye, Mr. McCall. Goodbye, Mr. Spock.
Just go around and hug each of them as you go down. The other thing that made me laugh was the fact that Kirk sees it. I liked a lot that he was really emotional. Like you could really see that he was happy that they found him. But the thing that made me laugh was he's like, okay. Warp factor 1 to Macus 3. And I was like, hey, so at warp factor 1, it takes 3 days. Like, pretty sure you could go probably 2 or 3. You don't gotta go that slow. Like,
yeah, you don't have to get there in 3 days. Like, these people are like sick. Doesn't matter if you get there on schedule or earlier on schedule. It would be fine either way.
Right. He's like,
it's not like they're saying like, hey, you have to be here on this day.
Yeah, like time. If you're, exactly. Yeah. I just, when he said it, warp factor 1, I was like, it probably should be like 5. Get there in a couple hours.
Hey, you get there in like 30 minutes and be a hero. Be like, oh, you got here early with all the medicine. Thank you. Countless people have not died from it. But he's like, yeah, I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there when I get there.
Joke's on us, right? He hates the people of the new Paris colonies. There's somebody on there he hates.
That's the other thing, too, about Ferris is that they're like, oh, yeah, I was expecting him to come back on the bridge again, like you said earlier, like when when they're like, all right, full 180 degrees.
Yeah.
And he like doesn't come back on and be like, what are you doing? I just picture him like out in his quarters or whatever, and the ship's just like, meh. He's like, that's weird. I'm sure the captain's going to the right place. I don't think he would be disobeying.
He never would disobey. And then it does it again. It goes back the other day.
Hopefully he's just like in the shower in his quarters.
With his
That's when everything
on.
That's when everything bad always happened to Archer. He was always in the shower.
Oh yeah.
Gravity turned off, and
well, you had to show Scott Bakula's hairy chest too. So yeah,
it's true. It's not wrong.
Because I've got things. With Spock and McCoy safe and sound on the bridge, Kirk confronts Spock at his science station about his actions, trying to get Spock to admit that the flare was a purely emotional act. Spock tries to evade the question by framing the action as a logical decision to act in desperation. Kirk puts it to him directly, asking if he is going to admit that it was a purely human emotional act. No, sir, replies Spock. Kirk then comments that Spock is a very stubborn man. Yes, sir, is Spock's response. With the exception of Spock, the bridge crew, all has a good long laugh.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, he even like goes around the room and shows everybody at their stations being like,
yeah.
It's like, it wasn't that funny.
Right. It's like, it's funny, but it's not that funny.
Yeah. They're just loving it.
It's like, oh, that Spock, he's so funny.
What a kidder. What a kidder. And then Ferris is like, what is all this jovial laughter?
What is this nonsense?
People are dying. We could be there now, but we're going warp 1.
We'll get there when we get there.
Not a moment soon.
Oh, gosh. So that concludes the episode of the Galileo 7. But before we close it out, we're going to get to the best part of the episode.
Caleb.
I think they need a new shuttle pod.
Caleb, who gets the Erica Ortegas Award for being most unlikable?
Ferris, the Ferris guy.
Yeah, the Ferris guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's definitely out of like Boma, who's probably the second. Ferris is much more worse because like Ferris is just being kind of pompous and jerky, where Boma is like stressed out. So
Yeah. Boma's in a survival situation.
Right.
And they could have literally just sent all that stuff like through a transporter. They didn't have to use like a starship.
Right. Okay, who gets the Elizabeth Cutler Award for being most forgettable?
The yeoman.
Oh, Yeoman Mears. Yeah, okay.
Yep. Didn't do nothing.
Yeah, true. She has like
Didn't
a
even
good
bring coffee.
She has like a good cool thing in the beginning when she kind of says certain things about the shuttle, like when they're looking at the quasar, like when they first are doing it, she sounds like she's going to be like a pretty prominent part of the away team, but then immediately is just constantly in the background.
She's just on the floor half the time.
Right. Right. All right. Now here is the difficult decision. Who gets the Trip Tucker Award as being the MVP?
Scotty.
Yeah. That was the best choice.
Scotty. Yeah. That's the only logical answer.
The only logical decision. Yeah. Scotty just stayed the course. He didn't care about funeral services. He didn't care about people dying. He didn't care about any. He was just like, I am fixing this stupid shuttle.
Scotty did the opposite of the thing that annoys me about Star Trek stuff is that he did his job.
Yes.
He just did his job. That's all he did.
Yeah.
The opposite of that is not doing your job and always questioning people in authority, which is like, yeah. So that's why Scotty's the MVP.
Yeah. I
Kept
agree.
his mouth shut and he did his job. Oh, there goes the rest of the fuel, sir. Now what, Mr. Spock? There's no more fuel.
I think he literally only comments on the situation like once, right? Because like I think they're getting bashed with the rock, and he turns over and he's like, "You're in a mess," or something like, "You're in a tough situation there, Spock." Spock, like, yeah,
he yells at Bowman.
Oh, true, yeah.
They're like doing stuff, and Bowman's got
sick of this computer. He
says,
says,
"Watch your mouth about the captain, sir." You shut your face.
What gets the Shran Award as being the best action sequence?
The spear almost hitting Spock in the head.
Yes. Yeah. I wasn't sure when I didn't before that scene happened. I wasn't sure if you were going to pick the like Charlie's Angel posing guys when they were like crouching and aiming, and then they start shooting in different directions.
No.
I was like, but yeah, when Spock has them, like he says, "You shoot over here." Yeah, exactly. Yes, that's
9 o'clock and 2 o'clock, and I'm going to stand up on this ridge and be like, "Fire when ready."
Yeah. Now I'm curious. What gets the NX award for some sweet ship stuff?
Yeah, you already stole it, but when the shuttle lands and they're getting the phasers out.
Yeah.
And I hit that button and that like drawer flips down.
Yeah.
I like that. I was like, I might need one of those. I might need one of those somewhere.
Foam TOS phasers.
Yeah. It'd be pretty sweet. I don't know how you could motorize it because that's immediately I was like, I wonder if there's no way that's motorized. That's gotta be like,
yeah.
That's gotta be like somebody off camera being like, flip it open. And the guy's like,
exactly.
And then he's like, he hit the button, and he's like, oh.
Yeah, exactly. It's absolutely what absolutely.
Because it was pretty seamless. When he hits the button, it folds right up.
Yeah.
So there has to be a guy being like,
now,
hit the button.
Yeah, I mean the other thing too, you know that's how it worked was the shuttlecraft doors, right?
Yeah,
the thing would flip down and the thing would slide. So it's clearly two guys putting this thing together and then pulling the other thing out.
I thought that was cool, like technology for the time period to be like, hey, so this shuttle pod should open differently than like every other door opens like this, but the shuttle opens, it goes, psh, and then the landing pod goes, psh.
Yeah,
and then the same way, like even like when Bowman comes in and says something, and then he walks out and he has to like manually shut the gate, and then the doors go, psh. So I was like, that's pretty cool. I like that. Cool.
And there also was like I don't know if that when they land it like unfolds or it's just permanently like that. But on the nacelle, there's like a lip for like a foot to step on.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so I was either going with those phaser things or all of those Fisher Price toys that the engine runs on. But I really honestly I like the practical wall safe.
Oh no, absolutely. When I saw that thing, I immediately went like,
I need one of those.
All right.
I just picture like an emergency situation.
Yeah.
One of those giants is coming, they're like, get the weapons, and he's like, click, and then she's like, nee, nee, nee. You're
trying to jam your hand like in there quickly.
The gear gets like stuck, and he's like, nee, nee, and it just stays like, and it just keeps shutting. No.
And then they also had those like really funny like hip sashes for the phaser.
I like those. Yeah, I don't know why I like those.
Yeah,
they're pretty kind of cool. I like it. Yeah, I don't know.
Well,
I really,
if you really look at it, it's like they put that sash on and then the phaser dangles from it, and it 100% looks like cowboy stuff, right? Like he's got
yeah,
the holster and the guns
like
hanging down.
waist, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like sharpshooter.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I really, man, I really enjoy the original like uniform, like more than I have before.
Yeah.
I really like the riding boots and the pants
Yeah.
have like that flare.
Yeah, the flare, yeah.
And they're basically just wearing like a sweater. It's just like a thin sweater with like the
Yeah.
I was like,
the collar and stuff, yeah.
man, I kind of like that. I kind of like that.
Okay, what gets the Porthos Award as being the cheesiest thing of the episode?
Man, the Fisher Price engine parts.
Okay, yeah.
That to me, I mean, yeah.
Do you think
the
it's
giant
the
spears?
green and orange thing he's looking through, or it's like when he's putting the phaser?
Spock hands him one, and it's very much like someone cut off the end of one of those Fisher Price like hammer things.
Yeah, okay.
That we all had as kids.
Yeah.
He's like, here you go. And he's like, oh, the Eon Flux compartment generated device. Perfect. I was like, that's not what that does. If they were like silver, if they painted them silver, I'd be like, okay, yeah. I believe it. I'll believe it. I'll buy it.
Yeah.
But they were just bright yellow and red. And I was like, that's not what those would look like.
Right.
Engine parts wouldn't look like that. No. But you know what? They remind me of the Jeffrey tube, all those knobs and buttons and greeblies up there in the Jeffrey tube. It's all like they're all bright colored. It's weird.
Yeah. Otherwise, you have no idea what that tube is for.
Nope. Could just be a Boeing pipe.
All yellow tubes are meatloaf that is dispensed at regular intervals. Flowing meatloaf through the entire Starship Enterprise. Don't crack them open; it'll make a terrible mess.
Yeah,
that's why in Benga
Captain,
when they got on the planet and the Gorn were eating everybody on the ship, he was like, "Oh, one of the meatloaf pipes must have burst. There's meatloaf."
Oh no! One of the ketchup dispensers blew up. I can't believe someone would just spill all their salsa all over the floor and not even clean it up. It's like, all right, Mbenga.
They must have been losing their minds on the planet.
How many things do you need to see in Mbenga before you're like, it's like everything.
But it's nice to also look back at Star Trek, right? Like you look back, you take TOS here, and then you look at Strange New World, and you're like, some of the stuff that you think in those episodes is like, that's kind of weird or dumb or irritating that characters act a certain way. But then you watch the original series and you're like,
yeah,
it's more intentional. It's more intentional than you think. Yeah.
You're like, oh, they're doing a thing.
Right. Exactly.
Gosh, yeah.
All right. And finally, what gets the Enterprise Award as the best scene of the episode?
I don't know. I could do something like funny and goofy, but I really enjoy the part where Kirk says, "Keep your nose off my bridge."
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And he basically tells that guy to shove it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I just want you to know, Kirk, it's this time, and he's like, yeah, I can read time. There's 3 hours left. Thanks.
Right.
Okay.
But did you know? I get it. Get off my bridge.
Shut up. I like how the yeoman brings them coffee. It's just like, it's very clearly just like the coffee cups from the set, like for the actors. They're like little like foam ones.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, man, in the future they don't even have like nice coffee mugs. That's crazy. They're still using harmful like styrofoam.
Oh yeah. Clearly. Good to
like,
the
well, at least it doesn't hurt our planet. We just jettison it off into space. It doesn't matter.
Away with it. All right. So you, as the audience, go down in the comment section and write what you thought of the episode. Let us know what your favorite scene was, or what was the cheesiest thing to you. But next week be a little interesting episode. Next week is going to be a partial two episode thing. So next week we are going to have an abbreviated discussion about the menagerie parts 1 and 2. And then we're going to have a full review of the episode The Squire of Gothos. So
Wow.
the reason why we're having an abbreviated discussion of the menagerie is because this is the episode that Captain Pike shows up in. But without getting into it too much, there's reasons why we're not going to do a full entire discussion. So,
yeah.
So look for that next week. It'll be an abbreviated of that, but then a full on review of the Squire of Gothos, just like we did the Galileo 7 today.
Sweet.
Also, today when this comes out, we should be doing our Star Trek RPG adventure session. Should start up again, so you should see that in a couple days from now. So we're probably currently filming it and playing it as this episode is airing. So
you
can wait for that in a couple days from now. And is there anything on your channel, Caleb, you would like to promote?
Oh, let's see what came out. So, I did a video on Star Wars thing. I made the 3D printed, painted up Babu Frick, and I made his little doorway.
That was cool.
Yeah, and then probably my most recent video that you probably will see or has already been out is I made some of the credits from Starfield. It's a quick video. I just 3D printed them and painted them, and yeah.
Oh, okay.
I like doing quick little videos. They kind of help me like do something and put something out, but also work on a bigger project at the same time.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of what I did.
Very cool.
It's kind of cool. Everybody's playing Starfield right now, and there's lots of other stuff to make from that game, but I just really enjoy credits from sci-fi stuff.
Absolutely.
So maybe that'll be another thing. Maybe I'll make some Star Wars credits and some
like
Star Trek credits.
And like a big Sonic ring.
God. A big Mario coin.
Yeah. A big Zelda ruby. There's tons of stuff.
There's lots of stuff, yeah. Well, my brother bought these for me in Epcot. These are from like Guardians, the Guardians ride. These are supposed to be like the in-universe like credits.
Yeah.
Guardians. And they're like super cool. They're just acrylic.
Yeah.
Like plastic, but they're engraved and they're like super cool.
Yeah.
I just love the idea of like you carry these around in your pocket. Like these are like money. Same thing with like the Starfield one.
Yeah.
I think these are supposed to be a little bigger from what I've seen, but it makes more sense that they're small.
Well, yeah.
I think they did a collector's edition where they gave this came in your box. I've seen.
It was a little bit bigger.
Yeah. But I have 3D printed this for free.
Yeah. Well, we'll go with
Don't
the one
tell.
that came in the box is more like commemorative and more like display worthy, where that's in-game size.
Yeah. Exactly.
Come
Don't
for
tell
us,
Bethesda.
Come for us.
Yeah. Bring it. We're going to keep stealing your stuff until you make a remake of Fallout 3.
Yeah, and Skyrim 4 or
5. They're. I don't know what's going on with them lately.
Who knows?
So,
if you like the video, like the video. If you dislike it, dislike it. Share it with all your Star Trek friends and family. Subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and ring that bell for notifications so you can catch it on Sundays at 5. We appreciate you watching. Computer, end program. See you guys.
bye.
The Retrek Review is a Daystrom Holodeck podcast produced in association with the Plastic Underground Props. Hosted by Caleb Stoddard and Will Wilbur. Edited by Will Wilbur. Our intro song is by Kaylee Joy Rookledge. Our theme song is by Samo Studios. And our outro song is by Tommy T. Title card art created by Caleb Stoddard. Trophy art created by Adri Wilbur of Love by the Letters. Synopsis and written plot provided by memory-alpha.fandom.com. Star Trek is created by Gene Roddenberry, and all official clips and pictures are owned by Paramount Pictures. You can follow us at the Plastic Underground Props and the Daystrom Holodeck on Instagram and on YouTube. Thanks.
Oh, Mrs. Spock, so funny. So funny.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes. Emotions.